Welcome to my garden again. This time I'm going to introduce you to some of my experiences as a young man in Ireland. You might be wondering what the flat cap is for. Well, it's in tribute to Jeff Billington, a good friend of mine, who said that it made him look old. Actually, I think it makes me look young. I was very fortunate in my riding career. I produced a great many horses over the years and sold a lot, advised hundreds of people on their purchases. I show jumped up to Grand Prix level and rode dressage to a relatively high standard. I also evented pretty tidily. Some of my happiest times were spent as a young man in Ireland. I rode in some very competitive point-to-point races and hunted a lot with the Scarteen, the Galway Blazers and the Clare Harriers, as well as show jumping regularly all around the West Coast and competed at Dublin Horse Show in Ballsbridge. My first venture into Ireland was securing a working pupilship at Burton Hall near Dublin, with the great Colonel Joe Hume Dudgeon. The Colonel, wow, he was without doubt one of the greatest horsemen who ever lived. He was the trainer of both the Olympic show jumping event and eventing teams in Ireland and had ridden at the very highest level himself. He was also decorated soldier and commanding officer of the Royal Scots Greys during World War II. Believe me, he knew the word discipline, and he always checked the yard every evening, even from his wheelchair. Woe betides you if your work was not up to scratch, because you stayed behind till it was. I went as a working student to Burton Hall, aged 17, and it was my first time living away from home. I arrived on St. Patrick's Day, innocent as a newborn spring lamb. Some clever dick decided he was going to introduce me to Guinness. For anyone who's not heard of it, it's a very strong, very heavy black beer. I've never touched alcohol in my life. By the end of the day I had, like a lamb to the slaughter. I reckon I drunk about 4 pints that day, and for a young lad, innocent of the effects of booze, that was a lot. I also experienced room spin for the first time. Oh, I can feel it now. I'm being taken home in a Volkswagen Beetle lying on the back seat with my legs hanging out the window. It was without doubt the worst hangover I've ever had, and repeated the immortal words, "never again," quite a few times during my self-inflicted misery the next day. To this day, I've never told my 94-year-old mum about it. She'd kill me. Never took to liking Guinness, strangely enough. Don't know why. Most of what I learned at Colonel's was through watching great riding and listening to great teaching, as well as being put through the mill by Chief Instructor Sergeant Major Fraser McMaster, a former rough rider in the Colonel's regiment, the Royal Scots Greys. A rough rider isn't a rider that rides rough. A rough rider is a rider that rides rough horses. He would teach a ride of up to 15 or 20 riders, some of which were top-class show jumpers and event riders, and little old me in the middle somewhere. He repeated every day, "There's two ways of doing things, the right way and the wrong way, and we're going to do it the right way." Nothing got past him. Another of his well-known directives was, and I quote, "erectness without stiffness, suppleness without slackness." No euphemism is intended there, by the way. I was also very privileged to have been able to watch two of Ireland's best in Ada Matheson, a very accomplished show jumper, and Penny Morton, an Olympic event rider. They were very talented and a great influence in my youth. They used to perform a pas de deux without bridles and do things like jump in a row of high-back kitchen chairs without a bridle. Pure talent. When I left Burton Hall, the Colonel brought me into his office. "Now, Dillon," he said, "what do you intend to do with your life?" I replied, and I haven't left Liverpool this long, "I'm going to be a show jumper, sir." "No, you're not, sir," he told me. I tried to repeat myself, but was shouted down by this tiny man in a wheelchair. "You're going to be a horseman, young man." He was very wise and explained his meaning, very simply, so that I could teach all three disciplines, so that I could learn the meaning of hard work, so that I could ride in any discipline to a good standard, and also would learn to understand every different type of horse. That was, of course, the best piece of advice an ambitious young man like me could ever have received, and I've been grateful to him ever since. "So now, Dillon," he said, "go and become a horseman, do everything, go eventing, learn dressage, go hunting, ride in races, show jump, and then decide." So I did. One of the funniest memories I have is riding in Ireland. Well, it was both funny and painful. Riding in a point-to-point race in the west coast of Ireland in the county of Clare. I was asked to ride a horse belonging to a local farmer. Well, it was worth £5, a lot of money in those days. Never having sat on this horse, he told me in his best Irish accent, "Now listen to me, young fella. This horse is a grand jumper, but every time you come to a jump, shout, 'Hup!' Very loud now. Don't forget now, hup!" he yelled after me on the way to the start. We set off at a good pace and I remember to shout hup. I did this for about 6 jumps, then very, very foolishly, because the horse was jumping so well and the other jockeys were giving me a lot of verbal ribbing. So clever young me, at the next jump, I kept quiet. Yes, you guessed it. The horse hit the jump very hard, about a foot from the bottom, and the deck and me came together in a very hard and painfully union. The farmer owner of the poor horse came running over and said in his best West Coast accent, "What the feck happened? Did you not shout hup at every fence like I told ye?" I said groggily, "Well, I started to at the beginning of the race, but he was jumping so well I didn't bother at the next fence." The farmer looked at me with disgust and said, "You blithering idiot. The old horse is completely blind, but his hearing is grand." That was a good lesson to learn. Always listen to the person who knows the horse best, and never ride a blind horse, especially over jumps. I also learned to listen carefully when I was being spoken to, and to become a lucid instructor with quick observation and attention to individual needs, both equine and human. My mentoring program offers all of this through coaching in person, online Zoom and video critique, help with competition planning, and basically being there for my clients. Please contact me for details, as I'm sure you will find a program to suit you. More Irish stories to come. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening.